Welcome to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. Each week, we feature an episode from the best independent creators. Hit the subscribe button for more great true crime content. If you would like to help support Indie Drop-In, check out our Patreon at the bottom of the show notes. Today's episode is from Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to subscribe to Beyond the Rainbow and follow on social media. Enjoy the show.
Begin.
Hey, Rainbow Warriors. This is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast. It's not suitable for young children, and maybe not even for some adults. I tend to swear like a sailor, and I'm kind of proud of that. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. I'm your host, CJ. I'm gonna try something new each episode. I met an awesome lady that joined me for Get Vocal last Thursday. Her name is Kaylara, and she's a volunteer with the Transdo Task Force. She has a file full of cases she's working on of missing LGBTQ people, or LGBTQ people who've been found deceased and not been identified yet. So I decided each episode I'm going to start the show out describing one of the cases she's working on in the US and Canada. I will also post more information of that person on my website each time I cover one. So if you can go and look at the picture and information on my website, beyondtherainbowpodcast.com, that would be awesome. And if you could share it on your social media, that would be stupendous. Maybe you or someone you might know might have information that could be imperative in finding the person or the loved one of the person. This episode's missing but not forgotten person is Donald Izette Jr. He went by Donnie and he was only 19 years old when he disappeared. He disappeared under suspicious circumstances in 1995. Donnie would be 44 today. At the time of his disappearance, he was 6'2" and 165 pounds. He has brown hair, and his eye color is conflicting in different reports, but from his pictures, they appear to be brown. He has a mole on his neck and a scar on his abdomen. Here are some of the details of his disappearance. Donnie completed his freshman year of college in the spring of 1995 at Frostburg State University in Maryland. Donnie then decided to live a nomadic-type lifestyle. He left Maryland for Baltimore and then to Georgetown. He went to visit his mother in Cumberland, Maryland on May 7, 1995, and 7 days later, he phoned her for the last time on May 14th. Donnie had told her that he was in Santa Monica, California, but he wanted to come home to her in Cumberland. He was crying and he sounded hysterical, she said. He told her he would call her back soon so he could tell her where to wire him money for his trip back. He ended the call with his mom in a hurry, almost like he didn't want someone nearby to hear him. Donnie never called his mom back. Donnie was with a guy named Shane, and Shane was allegedly abusive towards Donnie. The next few months of events are a little bit muddled to me. But Donnie was last seen by an unidentified friend in San Francisco, California, and this was during July of 1995. The friend said Donnie was living with an elderly man, and that's about all we have on Donnie right now. Donnie's mother reported him missing to the Maryland police in July 1995. So once again, I will post my website to the show notes along with the other resources I used for the episode's case. By the way, I don't normally say it, but all of the resources I use for my episodes can be found in my show notes. Although since I've moved to Spreaker at the end of May, I think all of the episodes prior to moving to Spreaker had the resources information wiped out. So, sorry. And I swear I write my own episodes. I don't plagiarize anyone. This episode's case was also brought to me by my new friend Kaylara with the Transdo Task Force. I've never heard of it before, and frankly, the crimes committed are freaking whack. Allegedly, the killing started in 2003. That's when 44-year-old Stephen Lorenzo from Florida and 36-year-old Scott Schweickert from Illinois met online, and they started to talk about their common interests. The two shared the love of bondage and Sado-Masochism with other gay men, along with recreational drug use. After having several conversations about this, the two started to concoct a plan to go and meet single men, and then they would force these men to be their sex slaves. Scott and Stephen met up in person at a gay club in the Tampa area. The club was called the 2606, but now it's called Christoph's. Once at the club, Stephen and Scott started to cruise younger men that they thought were hot, and then they brought the man back to Stephen's bungalow. After they got back to the bungalow, Stephen and Scott would drug the man with GHB, which is a date rape drug, and then they would sexually torture and rape these men. While this was fun for them, they wanted more. They wanted a permanent sex slave, and they started to get worried that once they released their victim might talk and get them in trouble. They came up with a new plan. Bring hot younger gay man home to Stephen's bungalow, sexually torture and rape him, and keep him there against his will until they tired of him. And then they could either sell him to some other fetish creep or kill him. On December 20th, 2003, 26-year-old Jason Galehouse went to a gay club with his roommate. The two men lived in the Tampa area, and this was a club that they were regulars at, the 2606. The night for the men was spent dancing and drinking and flirting with guys, a pretty typical club night. However, around 2:45 a.m., Jason found his roommate in the club, and he told him he was leaving with a couple of older white guys he met. The roommate did not see the men Jason left with. Jason just left, and that was the last his roommate saw of him. Stephen and Scott met Jason at the club that December 20th, 2003. He was perfect for what they had in mind. He was young, cute, and just the kind of sex slave they were looking for. Stephen and Scott took Jason back to Stephen's bungalow in Seminole Heights, which is a neighborhood in Tampa. At the bungalow, the men indulged in more alcoholic drinks, only Jason's drink was a special cocktail mixed with GHB. The deadly duo spent the night sexually torturing Jason, and as Jason was in and out of consciousness, Scott claimed at one point he came out of the bathroom and Stephen had strangled Jason to death. Scott helped Stephen carry Jason's body to the garage. This is where they proceeded to disassemble it into many pieces with an electric saw. Then the two men got dressed and drove all around Tampa, scattering Jason's body parts in various garbage cans and dumpsters. The very next night, Stephen and Scott were back at the 2606 Club. They were trolling for another victim like the one they had murdered and disposed of the night before. They found 26-year-old Michael Wachholz. Michael left the 2606 Club with Stephen and Scott, only he got into his own car, a Jeep, and he followed them to Stephen's bungalow. Inside the bungalow, the night went on pretty much the same as the night before. A drug drink for the victim, sadistic sexual torture, and the death of Michael Wachholz. The only real difference? This time the deadly duo didn't saw Michael into many pieces. Instead, they wrapped him in a sheet and put him in the back of his own Jeep. And then they drove him to an apartment complex parking lot and abandoned the Jeep with Michael in the back seat. Friends and family members of both victims searched and searched for their missing loved ones. Missing posters were plastered everywhere in and around Tampa. Equality Florida demanded action by the police. They even called a town meeting with law enforcement there to discuss the crimes. After that town meeting, brave victims came forward and they reported being drugged, sexually tortured, raped, and then released by two men they had met in a gay club. The police were given information that led them to Stephen Lorenzo and Scott Schweickert. Picked up and charged with drugging and sexual assault on 9 men in the Tampa area, Stephen and Scott were already in big trouble. With plenty more to come. Their case went to trial, and in 2005, Stephen received 200 years for the federal drug charge of drugging 9 men. In 2007, Scott received 40 years for his part of drugging the men. A search of Stephen's bungalow found Jason's blood beneath the cobblestone cement floor in Stephen's garage. As well, Stephen's computer was seized, and it contained many pictures of Michael Wachholz, both in life and death stages. It took 9 years for the prosecution to build its case of murder against Stephen Lorenzo and Scott Schweickert. But when they finally brought the cases of Jason and Michael's murders to court, Scott was ready to turn on his partner in crime, Stephen. He was ready to throw him under the fast-moving bus. Scott claimed Stephen committed both murders, and that he only helped by disposing of the bodies. In return for testifying against Stephen, Scott was assuring he would avoid a death penalty. He received a life sentence instead. Stephen's trial is ongoing. He chose not to be represented by counsel, and he's representing himself in court. Which we all know, warriors, if you have no fucking clue what you're doing, you should never, ever represent yourself in court. Not a good idea. But this fucker has managed to stall the trial over and over again. First, he claims insanity. He was deemed by a judge not incapacitated by a mental illness, and he was perfectly able to stand trial. Then he claimed double jeopardy. Stupid ass. Do you not realize that that law can only come into play when you're convicted of the same crime twice? The first crime he was convicted of was drugging 9 other men. And now, this is for first-degree murder convictions. 2 different crimes, idiot. The judge tried to explain this to him, but he still claimed his rights were being violated. I'm so glad he decided to represent himself. Incidentally, I never saw the sex crimes being added to what these men were being tried for. And as much as I dug, I couldn't find any updates on Stephen's case. The last bit of info I could find was that he was scheduled to trial March 2019. But he probably had it stalled once again. So I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of this episode, I said, allegedly the killing started in 2003, when Stephen and Scott first met online. What I didn't tell you is there were disappearances similar to that of Jason and Michael way before 2003. And get this, 3 of the victims lived at the Drake Towers, a condominium complex across the street where Stephen Lorenzo lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time of the disappearances. What you talking about, CJ? Yep, it's true. Both 24-year-old David Rhodes and his roommate, 24-year-old Barry Block, were gay men that mysteriously disappeared on June 22, 1988, from their Drake Tower condo. All of their possessions was left in their condo, with the exception of a briefcase and a cell phone that belonged to David. And I'm picturing this big old dinosaur cell phone because the year was 1988. There was some drug use mentioned, but the information on that wasn't very abundant. Stephen Lorenzo would have been 29 years old when David and Barry went missing. And as for any drug mention, we already know Stephen was into drugs, and not just on himself. 34-year-old Mark Jackson also lived in a condo at the Drake Towers. He too disappeared, but 16 years after David and Barry, in 2004. Mark, a gay man, was known to dabble in crystal meth and other drugs. Now I'm going to let you in on something. There's 20 pages of dialogue between Stephen Lorenzo and multiple men on a chat site. And it does appear that Mark Jackson was one of these men. I'll put the link in the show notes, should somebody want to read these dialogues. But be forewarned, warriors, there's a lot of sex talk and a lot of talk about drugs. In 1995, James Shoemaker disappeared from Tampa. On October 20th, James was dropped off at a Tampa gay bar called the Parthenon. Now it's called the Garage. James was never heard from again after that. And another Mark Thompson, was a 30-year-old man who disappeared from a pub around midnight in Clearwater, Florida. The distance between Clearwater and Tampa, it's only about a half an hour drive. Mark's mom reported him missing. His truck was found abandoned in Tampa. 31-year-old Bradley Williams disappeared on June 8, 2001. He didn't show up for his job at the post office that day. His coworkers thought maybe he just quit and didn't tell anyone. No one reported him missing for over a week. And when he didn't call his home on Father's Day, his parents then reported him missing. His mom went to his apartment. When she went in, she saw his 2 cats and parakeet, and they were starving for food. They survived, though. Bradley's wallet, cell phone, and all of his possessions were still in his apartment. His car was found abandoned in a parking lot near the Metropolis Gay Club in Tampa. 6 good-looking gay men, plus the 2 who Scott Schweickert claimed Stephen Lorenzo murdered. They were all about the same age. They all went missing between 1988 and 2003 in the Tampa, Fort Lauderdale areas of Florida. Kind of makes you think there was a serial killer loose, doesn't it? Once Stephen Lorenzo was locked up for the federal drug charges in 2004, the disappearances of handsome younger gay men seemed to subside. I don't know, maybe we should marinate on the speculation Stephen Lorenzo is a serial killer. Unfortunately, unless he confesses or tells someone who rats him out, or if we can find the bodies of the 6 men never found, we might never know. For the families, I know that thought is unbearable, and it's a living nightmare for them. And as we who are enthralled by true crime cases know, warriors, someone must know something. They must remember something that can help solve these cases. Any information that someone might see as unimportant could make the world of difference in an unsolved crime case. If you or anyone you know might even have the slightest tip that could help solve these disappearances, please contact the Tampa Crimestoppers at 1-800-873-TIPS. That's 1-800-873-TIPS. I will also put a link to each of the missing men's Charlie Project page in the show notes. So maybe take a look at those and share those on your social media if you can. Also, if you know anyone that lived in the Tampa or Fort Lauderdale area at the time of the men's disappearances, if you could please share this with them. Thanks so much, Rainbow Warriors. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
Thanks to Beyond the Rainbow for the amazing episode. Check out the links in the show notes to subscribe. Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. If you would like your show featured, reach out to us at Indie Drop-In on all social media or go to indiedropin.com. See you next time.